Sure, there's a gazillion questions. So this morning, in the interest of time, and I want to leave as much time for conversation and questions, I'm going to turn it over to Jon. We'll forego introductions, and I'm just going to turn it over to Jon and his team to manage the hour and make sure that we can get as many questions quickly. So Jon? Take it away, I'm done.
Good morning, everyone. We have Debbie Rudd with RRM Design Group and Bill Lee with Land Econ Group this morning that have been our consultants in our downtown visioning process. And this morning we wanted to go over quickly the four scenarios, future scenarios for the downtown that we presented at the workshop on November the 29th in the evening. And then I think we want to roll into the economic analysis that Bill Lee has conducted and save plenty of time at the end of this meeting today for questions. Because I know when we had the meeting on the 29th, the workshop, there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to. And last time we met with this group, there were a lot of questions. We kind of ran out of time. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Debbie so she can do the scenarios and we'll then start with Bill.
So how many of you were at the last public workshop? Oh, most of you. Or how many have seen it online if you weren't at the workshop? Okay, so pretty much everybody's already seen this presentation, right? We have it broken up into the first part, which is community engagement. I think if most of you seen it. How many people haven't seen any of it? Oh, perfect. So we are going to skip over because I feel like we really want to get to the discussion. But I want to remind you what's in all the alternatives. So we will, you've heard how downtowns are changing, how retail's changing, how we need to rethink how we're dealing with parking structures. And that changing the downtown is, remember, we see the vision really accomplishing three different things to get that vitality. We want to change, we want to do some great placemaking, some gathering spaces, change land use and parking, and then the economic component. And we continue to hear people don't want change because they want to keep the character, but they do want change because they want more vitality. So how do we do both of that? So scenario one really is the minimum. We have four scenarios. The first one has very minimal change. Actually, all of them have very minimal change. I wish I would have emphasized that a little bit more at the workshop because none of them are showing a great amount of change, and that's because that's what we heard from the community. And the council asked us to add alternative 4 because they wanted a little bit more out of the box. So scenario 1 is minimal change with just some entry features, and the parking stays the same with just changing the parking. And we suggest on all the alternatives that we would change land use and parking. But physically, we would still keep those parking lots on scenario 1. This is just a massing model. And the purpose of this is really to illustrate that even with very little change, you will get a little bit of revitalization with scenario 1 if we change the parking and land use standards. So the colored buildings show where you might see change. And then this takes you down and shows you could see a second story addition even under today's zoning if we change the parking and took away some of those barriers. Scenario 2 has 2 primary entry, but now we're stepping it up and we're showing more of just a simple monumentation, but still celebrating the entry to downtown a little bit more than we do today. We're introducing paseos to really enhance the pedestrian connections. We're introducing, we heard loud and clear, we need to figure out a way to connect the Civic Center and connect Lincoln Park. So we're suggesting an overcrossing to connect the Civic Center in this scenario and an undercrossing. The difference when you see scenario 4 is we still do an overcrossing, but it changes locations. And each scenario kind of has a different solution for that. Scenario 2 just has one plaza in the heart of the downtown with opportunities for outdoor dining. The parking, the dark gray stays the same. The blue is the underground parking structure that covers parking plazas 2 and 3. We're showing a live theater In scenario 2, we're showing affordable housing or workforce housing on parking plaza 8. And then this shows an increase in change with the two-tone blue buildings. And this is a 3D of what that could look like. And you see the undercrossing in the foreground, you see the overcrossing. I don't have a pointer. Maybe you can't see my pointer. At the top of the screen, I'm gonna just keep one quickly. This one flies down to the Central Plaza. You see it today. You see just an illustration of what if we did some changes to the facade. You're not seeing changes to the building heights, but you could really expand outdoor dining and create a people place on that alternative. And then we move to alternative 3. 2 primary entry elements going over the street this time, really celebrating the entrance into the downtown and showing at San Antonio and Edith a roundabout. And then when you build the roundabout, you do an undercrossing instead of an overcrossing. And then the overcrossing would be at Lincoln to connect Lincoln Park to downtown. Scenario 3 introduces the shared streets. The shared streets would just be on the cross streets on 2nd and 3rd Street. And you've all heard the whole explanation of shared streets, so I'm going to skip over that. And the parking plazas, the plazas would be the center spine of plazas, also having some plazas outside the Light Theater. And then the idea that the plazas would be programmed into spaces that would attract people like the people, the outreach was telling us, we need places for young people, we need places for young adults, we need children places, we need outdoor dining places. So things like chess and tennis tables, outdoor dining. Introducing activity nodes, where we have opportunities for live music, for fire rings, public art. And then the parking for scenario 3, showing 2 underground parking lots on this scenario, 2 above ground parking lots wrapped with office uses. A live theater, and then again, we're showing affordable housing. On scenario 3, we show affordable housing in 2 locations. On scenario 4, it's a little more heavy on office. Now you're seeing even more change in the downtown with the 2 tones of blue. The lighter tone is showing that this would all be 2 stories on State and Main, and the darker blue would be the 3 stories. And, oops, sorry. On this one, you see now we have a 2nd story building. We have outdoor dining on the roof overlooking the plaza. And then we have scenario 4. Scenario 4, we're suggesting public art at the entries instead of your traditional entry. A roundabout at San Antonio and Edith, an overcrossing. Now the overcrossing is right here near the library. And the idea there is that you would cross the street there, you wouldn't have to cross Edith again. You would go right into the downtown by crossing it at that location. And it would require some streetscape enhancements along San Antonio, but could be a nice solution to connect the downtown to the Civic Center. On this one is the dining hub. This is where we're going to create an incentive zone for dining, where we have, we take away some of the barriers that people have today. And people, what we kept hearing is the number one thing people want are more dining opportunities to revitalize or to kind of add vitality to the downtown. So take away some of the parking or all the parking requirements in that zone, expand the sidewalks, let them expand outdoor dining onto the sidewalks, let them expand outdoor dining onto the plazas. So really create kind of a hub for dining. And on scenario 4, we're upping the shared street idea and putting shared streets not only on the side streets, but also on Main and State. The parking plaza, or the plazas, we've increased the plazas. Now that we have that overcrossing, we're showing a plaza all along San Antonio, or it may not be a plaza, it may just be landscaping with a nice pathway, but really providing a strong connection there, and then keeping that central spine. Parking, showing 2 underground parking, the dark blue with the black dash are the underground parking opportunities, and above ground opportunity as well. This shows that that enhanced streetscape along San Antonio to provide that pedestrian connection. We have the Life Theater again. And affordable workforce housing again. And then we're showing a boutique hotel in this scenario as well, which we'll see how that affects the economics of it. Now you're seeing we've introduced 3-story structures on Main and State as well, but they'd be required to step back from Main and State, so they're not right along the street frontage. So you see the dark blue is the 3rd story, stepping it back, how it changes the feeling of the street. And there you see it in this sim. And with that, I will turn it over to Bill to walk through his.
Let's go to the new one.
Yes.
Great, thank you, Debbie. So we did some analysis of what the scenarios would translate to in terms of probable new development over 10 to 20 years, and what the impacts might be, one on activity, what are the construction costs for these scenarios, and what's the fiscal impact on general fund operations. So I'll quickly go through those with you. For all the scenarios, we assume the parking standards would be revised to 2 per thousand within the parking district after FAR 1, and 2.5 per thousand in the downtown outside the parking district. I like a single requirement for all commercial uses, because if you're a landlord and you lose a tenant, you get a slightly different commercial tenant, you're not stuck with having to provide 1.5 or 2 spaces, and you can't do it in some way. We also recommend a parking in lieu fee, initially set at $25,000. The higher the parking in lieu fee, the tougher it is to run your pro forma and justify development, so you can play with that as to how much development incentive you want. $25,000 is pretty favorable. If you want to slow things down, you could set that fee higher. For hotels, the way you currently have hotels penalizes hotels that have a high level of service and a high level of employees per room. So we're saying just make it 0.8 spaces per room, maybe 0.7, rather than having it being employee-based as well. So that's underlying all 4 scenarios. So Debbie's covered the scenarios, so I'm going to quickly just, different scenarios have different levels of expected forecasted development. I'm not going to go into that in detail, but just go quickly into the impacts. This is about what we think you have now downtown. It's mostly retail and service, the red. These are thousands of square feet. Blue is office. The mustard color is residential, and then we put in the fudge factor for post office and everything else. So about 1.4 million square feet downtown. And in terms of sales, the last measurable year we had based on sales tax collection, about $150 million in retail sales downtown. To measure activity, since we can't count people, and so we use sales as a surrogate. And we took out the auto and business portion. So we use general retail, restaurant, and food and drug sales as a surrogate for downtown activity because it is something we can estimate. Here are the details on the scenarios. I don't know if you can see it on the screen, but it's different levels of development. I think it goes from 200,000 in additional development to about 650,000 for scenario 4. And in terms of additional retail sales downtown, it goes from about 10% more to about 20% more among the 4 scenarios. And we have the details for each scenario. We don't have time to go into it, but it's here. And then we took, RRM gave us the public improvement costs of the scenarios. And it's heavily parking. If you make the plazas, public plazas, and you want to replace the parking and you want to park the new development, about the red is the parking cost, the rest of it is the public improvement cost. So it goes from, very little here to $140 million. And this is the detail which we have. And this is comparison of annual additional sales against your investment in the scenarios. So as you put more and more money in, the rate of return actually goes down because we only have so much land to deal with. We're not, if you were to take on the Civic Center area across the street or do more down San Antonio Road, you'd probably get more activity. We looked at your general fund balance. This is on an operating basis, property tax, sales tax, hotel tax, and public service costs. And this is what the scenarios come out to be. It's not too different across the 4 scenarios, except scenario 4, which has about a 70-room boutique hotel. And that's the hotel, the light green. So you can put that in any scenario and get that. The reason you don't get a whole lot of additional operating revenue for more development is, one, the city's share of the property tax dollar is 11.9%. So it's 12%. So the county, the transit agencies, the school districts, community college districts get the rest of it. So you don't get a lot of dollar return. 2, affordable housing is typically nonprofit development, doesn't pay property tax. There are exceptions. So the fact that you're trying to deal with this social issue of additional housing doesn't get you a lot of return in terms of property tax. So it depends on how you structure your scenarios in terms of land use, what the fiscal impacts will be. The general fund is about a $40 million fund. So we're talking about $100,000, $200,000. It's really not a big deciding factor on the scenarios. But for any of the scenarios, you can put in another boutique hotel, and that clearly has a favorable impact. I have recommendations, probably it's a little bit premature, so we can go into those if you want.
I
Yes,
have
sir.
a question. You say parking in lieu fee of $25,000 paid by the developer. It costs 50 or 60 or 70,000 for a underground parking, right? So who pays the difference? In your analysis, looks like it's the city.
That's
But
right.
how about the merchants who are going to benefit from the higher sales paying their share? That should reduce the city's portion.
Well, there are really 3 typical streams for the parking to be built by the city. One is the in lieu fees. Two, I think you can raise those white dot permit fees. You're at a very nominal fee right now, it's almost free. And then three, there are parking citation revenues. Yes, I've done parking assessment districts in cities like Santa Barbara, and you get property owners / merchants to help pay for part of that. Politically, it's very difficult. And it's very difficult in a climate where your retailers are struggling. So it's a 20-year fight if you want to take it on. Yes, sir.
On that same subject, okay, a different scenario for parking. So what if you built the Bimble parking above ground, and you could park there for 2 hours for free, and any hour after that it's 50 cents or something, and you reduce the parking on the street to 90 minutes rather than 2 hours, and you drove, if people wanted to hang out in town all day, it might cost them $2, but over time, it builds up some revenue. Is there an analysis that would say a parking could pay over time for itself? I'm just saying that.
And that analysis has not been done. There are various parking scenarios you could work out, but this is a sort of a big picture, high-level visioning exercise. The problem with parking is, 50, 60, 70, 90,000 a space on the ground. And do you want to go above ground because that begins to erode the village character that you so dearly treasure?
I don't think the envelope's done. I think you propose an envelope, you don't see the parking. So I guess I'm confused.
On the underground part?
No, I'm talking about above ground with the building envelope around it. So
Oh, right.
if you're looking at it from the street, you don't see a parking structure.
Right, correct.
But it's there.
But there's a lot more mass in your downtown. I mean, you're still going to notice the mass. Yes, sir.
The concept, Bill, that you're sharing with us shows that the largest expense to the community is the parking, as shown in your example on red.
Right.
So if we focus on that largest expense and try to, in an open manner, identify what other communities do to decrease that expense, that would definitely impact the cost of the community. So what I would like to see from you is a projection on what the red area would look like if the city did public-private partnerships, where the parking was partially paid for by the developer of the partnership. The city would provide the land, the plazas, and the developer would come in and add additional parking underneath his structure, whatever the structure would be. It has to make economic sense and have economic outcomes. And in that way, it would, if not totally dismiss the red, but definitely decrease the red. What's your opinion about that, and why haven't you introduced that into the scenarios?
It clearly is a scenario worthy of consideration. The trouble is, when you do a development that has to, one, provide its own parking, and two, replace the public parking that's taken out, you get a pretty tall project. So your community has to be willing to deal with that. The other alternative is putting some of the public parking across San Antonio here in the Civics Plaza. You could do it probably a lot cheaper than you could do underground. The issue, downtown incentive, and who pays for public parking or private parking, it's a value of the community. I'm working in an Arizona community now, Gilbert, Arizona, and they're very pro-growth and pro-development. And they said, no parking requirements for any developer coming into the downtown. We'll build all the parking. So the city's building all the parking. You come in, you run your pro forma without parking. So it's just the value of that community. Yes, sir.
Sort of a variation of that, and you referenced earlier you were looking only at the triangle and not over here in terms of development opportunities. But a variation would be where you don't build on the plazas, but and so you aren't taking away parking you have to replace. I know the city's thinking about redoing City Hall, and I assume that's about 20,000 square feet. What if the city did a public-private there, kept the ground floor for civic purposes, allowed the developer to build another 3 floors, so that's about 60,000 square feet per developer. I have heard that that value is about $400 a square foot to a developer. I don't know if that's true, I'm certain. But assuming
That
that's...
was my number when I started the project.
Yeah.
It's close.
Yeah, so assuming that's the case, then couldn't the city generate 24 million in revenue in a public-private over City Hall, keeping the ground floor so there are 3 above it that go public or private? And then use that to do things like build a bigger community center or provide more there, or for other public amenities. Is that,
I
just,
mean, clearly, if the city wants to put its entire civic center campus in play, you know, whatever it is, 18 acres at $350, $400 a square foot, the city has a lot of real estate asset that it can convert to cash to do a lot of different things, if that's what your community wants to do.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced that the citizenry is willing to take that on. It's something I mentioned at day 1 on this assignment and was told that that's not your job, Bill. Just concentrate on this downtown.
yeah, I'm just, but again, I agree, I don't think the community is game for let's develop the whole civic center, but someplace that's gonna be developed, if they said, let's go 4 stories, that could generate upwards of 20 million, right, for the city that could be used for other purposes. And
Yeah.
I just want to brainstorm a little
and
bit.
at $400 a square foot, you just figure out how many acres you want to be able to take on.
Yeah,
There's an asset there
Yeah.
you can
Good.
take advantage of.
Thank you.
Mr. Rock.
I was surprised that first of all, I thought that Four Scenarios development was excellent and
Thank
wanted to say that publicly, but I was surprised that the sitting low-hanging fruit of restriping the plazas was not included. We are the only city between Los Gatos and Burlingame that has the width of parking spaces and the configuration that we literally are the only city. And we did the idea of 9-foot parking stalls where I understand there are people with baby carriages and they're seniors, but 8.5 feet, we're not talking about acres, talking about 8.5 feet. I was surprised that the parking recommendations got listened to in the parking ratios, but completely ignored in this restriping. That will help dramatically. Why are we doing, so now, why are we doing a whole project if we're being told not to?
This wasn't my staff. This is, we were in a meeting.
We did look at that at the beginning, and we figured out exactly how many more spaces we would get if we did that. And I think because of political reasons, we didn't want to cloud I think council just wanted to clear the slate for political reasons. And so that would, of course, if restriping happened, would clear things up, but we didn't want to cloud the same
Taking a
thing.
look at it, why is council telling you how to do
But
just
I
like
think
what's happening nationally that are.
we'll keep in mind too, that we're moving forward on the parking recommendations as sort of a separate review from the downtown vision. So that is moving forward on one track, and you know that we've got a meeting with our planning commission to look at the recommendations. And we'll get those in place, and then the downtown vision will proceed.
By the way, for the record, I don't remember council giving direction not to look at it.
The council did not form one.
I'm all for affordable housing, but I'm a little concerned about putting it downtown and losing sales tax and property tax revenue. Are the affordable housing scenarios, do they assume that there's like retail on the first floor, or are they all affordable housing?
All affordable housing.
So would it be more favorable if the first floor was like retail or office?
It's hard with affordable housing projects to put the retail on the ground floor, honestly. If you did workforce housing, which would not have the same kind of restrictions, you could put retail on the ground floor, but you notice the affordable housing is a little bit further out in the scenarios, so it's not right on the retail corridor. You have a lot of retail space in your downtown. And
Or office, I mean, office generates.
we could put office on the ground floor, that could be another option, yeah.
Yeah, it's the nonprofit affordable housing doesn't generate property tax, but the people living in the workforce of affordable housing units are going to be shopping here downtown, so they will generate sales tax, and that's been accounted for. Yes, sir.
Okay, so, I'm slowly trying to withdraw myself from a library downtown. You do have 500,000 to 700,000 people here coming through sprout through the day. And now what you said, I'm thinking, okay, so if we do build the brand new library right here, and you have that overpass going into town, and then now with parking, if you built a parking structure on the other side of the library, not visible to anybody, that would actually have enough parking, would that possibly work? Because at least you can get into town easier?
Sure.
Yeah.
Would?
Depends
Yeah.
on the design, right?
Yeah, I feel like if you have a really strong connection that people feel safe and it doesn't feel like a long walk, people will park a block away. I mean, it's really just a block away to go downtown.
Yeah, I never thought back in my earlier one. If you have, you can park in a parking structure all day, not worry about getting a ticket after 2 hours of being towed to this farmer's market or something. And with that should pull more people off the street. The street should have less, more of the, 90-minute or 1 hour type of parking, but people aren't going to run out and move their cars because they're in town for lunch and something.
What we usually see is people will do a loop, see if they can get the parking spot right in front, and they don't, they go park in the parking structure, and then they walk downtown. So, and it does allow, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to put in more 15-minute parking spots, so you can drop in, get your coffee and leave, and 2-hour parking spots or 90-minute parking spots in the downtown.
It have to be 30 minutes from the start.
You mentioned earlier that we have a lot of retail in town.
Right.
And certainly the retail world has changed dramatically with the expansion of online purchases.
Right.
So how does that retail number then, do we need to be maintaining or adding retail to our downtown, knowing that retail is not, you're really trying to move forward and think of the future. Retail is probably, maybe isn't it. And what scenario have you guys run to consider what really is the right number of retail based on how retail has changed, how the purchases have changed, and whether it should be offices or whether it should be a different use? Still ground for access to stuff with residential above maybe, but how have you guys modified, changing from the old traditional idea of lots of retail, people come in, they shop, they do the same. When the reality is people don't shop a lot now. There's a huge percentage, even for senior citizens, is done online. So how is that? What's your recommendation?
We've considered all that going forward. What we've assumed is that as certain projects redevelop, that the old retail will get taken out and the new retail space will be better space with higher ceilings and less depth. And the net retail change is almost nil. We have, you can't see this, but for the scenario 4, we're saying 50,000 square feet of new retail, but you lose 60,000 square feet of old retail. So for all of these, the retail, pretty much, the retail space, the amount of retail space doesn't change that much, but the retail sales per square foot goes up because you have better, newer retail, and you have more people downtown due to offices and housing. And most of this development is office, because that's where the market wants to go.
And I'll add to that, part of that is changing the way the land uses are written today, and what is allowed in your downtown. What type, it's not, right now it's pretty limited. We would suggest that we broaden that a little bit and allow some other activities to be included in that retail, like a yoga shop or something. So I think that would help balance that as well. And then the third thing is by introducing more people, like the workforce housing, you're going to be able to really help the existing retail more, and creating the placemaking component will help attract people to, again, help support that existing retail.
Let's go.
Okay, thank you. So my question is that most of these scenarios are predicated on a very substantial public sector investment in infrastructure and amenities in the downtown. The question is, what kinds of revenue generating strategies can a city like Los Altos use to begin to generate the revenues for that kind of public investment? My concern is that the pictures look great, but there could be a false expectation that the city will have the ability to actually implement these ideas.
I mean, from the fiscal analysis, the ongoing operating fiscal analysis,
Yeah.
the best development for the city's revenue is a hotel. It's a high-end boutique hotel. And depending on the size of that hotel, I mean, a 300-room hotel is $1 million a year in the transient occupancy tax. I'm not assuming it's one that big, I'm saying 70 rooms, so it's maybe a third of that. So that's one strategy. Clearly, you could put some of the costs back on the property owners through an assessment district if you want, but you have enough opposition to doing anything without taking on that whole battle. So taxing in today's world is pretty difficult.
We can also mention parking, having.
No, you can certainly charge for parking.
But will those raise sufficient revenue to begin to offset some of the $140 million in infrastructure investment?
Probably not, right? But maybe 50 million, you know?
Yeah.
And then I would just add that some of these improvements, if they're pedestrian oriented or bike oriented, is also to be grant funded. There are a lot of opportunities out there for those type of, and housing too. There could be some grant funding for housing, so that's another.
What about a bond or, I mean,
You could always bond for it as well. You see.
if we have a marketing campaign, we can do it.
The lady in the back, please.
I have two questions. One is on parking and one is on traffic. So the first question has to do with the affordable housing. Does it have parking with it? And if so, is there any consideration for using that? Because the people who live there will probably park at night and then they'll be gone during the day. And could that parking be used for general use during the day? And my second question regarding the housing, have you put into the plan, and I don't see it, any consideration for public transit to reduce the traffic generated by the additional people?
So the first question on parking for the housing, we almost always. Now, there are lately some projects where you don't provide housing for affordable housing or for multifamily, but not install, parking for that. But in a community like this, you would provide parking with the project, because parking would provide its own parking. Could it be shared? Probably a portion of it could be shared.
But in terms of operations, it's very difficult because you come home, you want a parking space, somebody's in your parking space, what happens? So from a property management point of view, they just do not deal with that.
So probably what you're saying is the parking for those units would be somehow with the building.
Right.
Right.
So they wouldn't put more stress on the town.
Correct.
No.
Right.
Right. So
Yeah,
the
they
second
would
question.
walk into the retail district
Great.
because they're 2 blocks away.
Great. And the second question is regarding the public transit, because if we have more people, there'll be more traffic. And I don't know if this is coordinated with public transit.
So it would need to be coordinated with public transit, but the answer is yes. The idea would be, even if we did the shared streets, there would be pockets for Uber, Lyft, rideshare, and public transit drop-offs, so that it'd be very easy for people to use public transit.
So the final question I have on that is, if we could include in the plan, and this I know would be a stretch, where the VTA is going, or where the public transit is, and how people could come in and say they didn't have cars. that would be great.
Okay.
If they didn't have cars. And how could that be accommodated? Because that's where we're hoping to move, right?
Right.
You have to remember, this is a vision document, it's not a plan. We're still some distance away from a plan. Sir in the back.
If I start from the very first chart you showed, the implication was that the overall goal for the overall visioning is to increase vitality downtown. Is that right?
Correct.
It's one of the goals. One of the goals.
If it's only one of the goals, I almost like an overarching goal, like what are we really trying to achieve here? But what bothers me is that from the start, we've immediately made the shift from vitality to retail sales. And even in the development impact, we're getting increased retail sales. And what I'm curious about is whether that's a realistic objective in this kind of a retail environment, in this kind of region. Aside from drugs and groceries, we really don't need retail downtown.
So can I start and then hand it to you?
Go ahead, yeah.
So you're right, vitality, just measuring it by retail sales is just one small area. He can talk to you about why he measured it by retail sales. But remember, we said to really create vitality, we're going to have to do more than just increase retail sales. We're going to have to do placemaking downtown, and we're going to have to change some of the existing standards and the barriers to development as it is today. So there's kind of three components, and then I'll let you talk about retail sales.
I mean, how do you quantify vitality?
You go out and count people?
Do you have any historical counts to measure against?
I would think if we looked at traffic, we could find it, and I would think that a traffic consultant could apply the same techniques that they measure traffic to measure pedestrians on the street.
Well, sure, you could measure, but we wanted something that had a history, so we could compare changes against that history.
Okay.
Rather than starting with a new metric that you have no history and you can't prove it's an improvement.
I just worry that we're entering into an economy that has no history anyhow.
Well, you clearly have history, you just gotta decide to use it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, sir in the back.
Yeah, one thing on that, I assume the retail sales includes restaurants.
Absolutely.
And so that's different from, that's something you can't buy online. A thought that occurred to me, well, two things. One, there is some history accounts downtown. I don't remember right off, but I think we counted 200 people busiest hour in front of Starbucks at a certain point to try to compare what was going on with other streets, and that was a lot lower than California Avenue or University or Mountain View's Main Street. This is sort of a point I wanted to make. I assume it's correct, but one thing that just occurred to me is if you do a roundabout, usually you limit the number of lanes going into and out of it to slow traffic so that people can merge more effectively. And that would effectively help connect the Civic Center and the downtown because you'd have slower traffic and fewer lanes out here. Is that correct, do you think? I mean, is that one of the outcomes of that roundabout is you reduce traffic?
Yeah, the roundabout does slow traffic, but it keeps traffic moving at an even pace.
Yeah.
So I think there can be a lot of benefits for doing the roundabout. People don't always consider roundabouts as a real pedestrian-friendly solution necessarily because you're going to have to walk around,
But walk longer to get across.
But an effect would be we'd lose 2 lanes on San Antonio and have probably while you're reducing traffic going into the roundabout.
I would have to ask the traffic consultant to weigh in on that one, sorry.
Yeah, when I took the survey, one of the things that bothered me was I was voting for things, yet I didn't know what the price was. In this, you have a lot of prices for a lot of these, different amenities and the different scenarios. John, is this available publicly, this presentation?
This presentation, yes, will be made available publicly, and Bill has a draft of the report that includes all this information. that we'll be making. It's an administrative draft right now, we're going through it, and do some adjustments to it, but that'll be made available for the public as well.
And isn't it already on the website now? Because this was included as part of our PowerPoint.
Yes, it's on the website right now, the entire PowerPoint presentation from November the 29th, which had Bill's valuations and estimates, but this particular PowerPoint was
With the cost.
presented today. This is brand new, so this is the first glimpse of the PowerPoint.
And I have a question for Debbie. What are the final deliverables to council?
So ultimately, what you'll end up with is a document that will document what the community has said, or the record of what the community told us, and it will have a preferred alternative, and it'll have recommendations of what needs to happen to implement that third alternative. What things need to change in zoning, in land use, and kind of maybe even a prioritization opportunity for where they could get funding, where, so it would all be in one document. We also propose to have a vision plan, a one-page vision plan with some perspective views, either bird's eye or at grade, looking at, so we call it a vision poster. And the idea with the vision poster is you would have not only your document, but you could have posters up at the chamber or in the city hall that would help keep that